Welcome to the Photos of the Past channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. This photograph was taken during the Mau Mau uprising in the 1950s in Kenya under British colonial rule. Colonial soldiers are seen keeping captured Africans under strict control to suppress the rebellion. The image starkly highlights the harsh colonial repression and the fight for freedom. This photograph shows a young child working in a cotton field in the early 1900s. Child labor was a harsh reality in the post-slavery southern United States, where families struggling to survive often had to expose their children to these grueling conditions. This striking photo depicts a colonial hunter and a young indigenous child standing beside him. The child may have been used as a servant or guide. During the colonial era, indigenous peoples were often subjected to severe exploitation and inequality under European domination, forced into roles of subservience. This image shows an African-American slave subjected to public whipping in the United States during the late 1800s. Such punishments were common tactics used by slave owners to instill fear and maintain control, reflecting the brutal and dehumanizing reality of slavery in America. This image shows a young girl displayed in a human zoo during the mid-20th century in Europe. These inhumane exhibitions reveal the brutal face of colonialism, where children were showcased like animals. The girl, surrounded by curious gazes, reluctantly accepts food offered by onlookers. This photograph depicts women being trained as part of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. Women were preparing for battle as key contributors to the fight against British colonial rule. The image powerfully highlights the role of women in the struggle for independence and resistance. This photo documents African miners forced into labor during the colonial era. In the quest for diamonds and minerals, workers toiled under slave-like conditions for meager wages. Many lost their lives due to harsh working conditions. This photo captures chained slaves and an overseer in colonial Africa. The slave trade robbed millions of their freedom, forcing them to endure inhumane conditions and immense suffering. This image stands as a silent witness to one of the darkest chapters in human history. Hey, my friend over 50, only 1 out of 100 people subscribes. Be that one, let's keep going. This photograph depicts a European colonizer interacting with African children during the colonial era. The children's bewildered expressions reflect the oppressive policies and cultural traumas of the time. Scenes like this serve as reminders of the deep wounds inflicted by colonization. This photograph depicts 2 African men pulling a European woman in a rickshaw during the colonial era. Using human labor for transport highlights the stark social divide and the deep inequality perpetuated by colonial rule, where indigenous people were reduced to servitude. This photograph from the colonial era shows a young European child posing as if riding a horse on the back of an African servant. It starkly captures the racial hierarchy and dehumanizing relationships perpetuated during colonial times, serving as a haunting reminder of that history. This photograph shows 19th century Zulu warriors posing alongside a cannon. The Zulu people were known for their resistance against colonial forces. The image highlights the contrast between Western technology and traditional warrior culture during the colonial period. This photo highlights the perceived dominance of colonial officers over indigenous people. The officers' comparison to the native reflects the oppressive and demeaning mindset of the era. Indigenous populations faced cultural erasure and extreme inequality. This photograph depicts a European colonizer interacting with African children during the colonial era. The children's bewildered expressions reflect the oppressive policies and cultural traumas of the time. Scenes like this serve as reminders of the deep wounds inflicted by colonization. This photograph depicts a colonial missionary surrounded by locals in Africa. European missionaries often traveled under the guise of spreading religion while actively participating in cultural and social assimilation. This image highlights the stark inequalities and the lasting scars of colonialism on indigenous communities. This photograph captures the servant culture of the 19th century. The black woman, likely working as a slave or servant, focuses intently on organizing a white child's toys. Her solemn expression silently reflects the inequality and exploitation that defined generations under the shadow of slavery. This photograph reveals one of the most painful reflections of slavery and colonialism. The deep scars and wounds on her face likely tell a story of violence and suffering endured during her lifetime. This haunting image stands as a silent yet powerful testament to the injustices and exploitation of history. The man in this photo could be a freed slave or a witness to the era of slavery. His cane and weathered facial features symbolize a life of hardship. Portraits like these serve as silent witnesses to the struggles of the post-slavery generation and the resilience of those who endured. This photo depicts one of the human zoos exhibited in Europe during the early 1900s. Individuals brought from Africa and Asia were showcased as exotic displays to the public. These dehumanizing spectacles highlight the darkest aspects of colonial exploitation and racial prejudice. This striking photo sheds light on the lives of enslaved children during the 19th century colonial era. The young African girl is posed beside a white child, holding a toy cart. The image powerfully reflects the stark social and racial inequality of the time. This photo depicts enslaved African workers in the cotton fields of the southern United States during the 1800s. The cotton they carried symbolized the backbone of the agricultural economy, yet behind its white fibers lay the sweat and suffering of countless enslaved Africans. We've reached the end of the video. Which photo from the colonial era caught your attention the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. We look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you for watching.